Welcome to Agile's 2025 webinar, Beyond Native Ads, How Agile Data Redefines Precision Marketing for Educators. Today's session is led by Agile's Digital Advertising Manager, Kassidy, who will explore how the shift from platform native targeting to first-party informed precision is transforming education marketing. In a privacy-first landscape, reaching educators effectively requires more than algorithms. It demands verified data, strategic segmentation, and timing aligned with the educator journey. Kassidy will uncover why native targeting often falls short, how Agile's first-party database of over 7 million verified educators delivers unmatched accuracy, and how aligning campaigns to academic and funding cycles drives real engagement and results. Gain insight into how Agile's compliant, future-proof data strategies are helping education marketers stay ahead as privacy standards evolve. Let's dive in and discover how to move beyond native ads and towards smarter, more precise, and educator-centered marketing in 2025.
I'm Kassidy. I'm the Digital Advertising Manager for Agile Education Marketing, and I have the privilege of working with our digital advertising clients on developing strategy and cohesive omnichannel campaigns to realize and reach their organizational goals and initiatives. Today, we're going to be discussing Beyond Native Ads, how Agile's data redefines precision marketing for educators in 2025. We'll be talking about how there's a strategic shift from utilizing native advertising targeting and how Agile approaches audience building and targeting for our clients' digital campaigns. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can reach educators most effectively on your digital advertising platforms, whether that's a traditional social media platform like Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram and Threads, or LinkedIn, or some of the different platforms that are true digital audiences or advertising audiences like Google or Microsoft. So there is a difference in how you can target audiences on platforms, and there's a combined approach that most advertisers utilize for reaching audiences, and we're going to call that native targeting. And then there's Agile's approach of how we go about targeting and reaching your key educator audiences. So first, we're going to talk about native targeting, what that means, how you go about building that and leveraging that for your digital advertising campaigns. So native targeting in the context of this conversation is building the audiences natively with demographics and different identifiers within the platform. So for example, if you go to Meta and you go to build an audience natively, you're selecting ages, you're selecting geographies, you're looking at people's interests, as well as how they may identify themselves on platforms. So it could be by a group that's created, whether it's an education employee, a teacher, a superintendent, a principal, things like that. LinkedIn has its own version of that. TikTok has its own version of that. But each platform has these predetermined fields that they have used to group users from their platforms into audience segments. And by combining all of those together, you create your custom audience, but via native targeting. So the benefit of that is it's already a platform. It's quick. The platforms have done the lift initially. So you just go in and you type and you select from a predetermined list, and then it gives you an immediate, this is your audience. There are very, very real limitations that come with that. And when we talk about the limitations of native targeting, it comes from those predetermined groups. So if you have someone who you're building a list for, you indicate that you want them to be a teacher, you want them to live in the state of Indiana, and they should be between the ages of 25 to 65 and up. With those type of parameters, myself would then be served an ad. I've never taught in a classroom. I'm not a teacher. However, I do meet the education interests that Meta uses to group me as a teacher. And then I also fit the geography and that age range. However, because I've never taught a day in the classroom, yet my employment history and my interests align with education, your ad dollars are then going to be spent on serving me ads when I am not your ideal audience. So native targeting has this double-edged sword of, yes, it's great for building audiences with these interests. However, because it's not confirmed information, it's inferred based off of what we look at, engage with, how we present ourselves on platforms, you're actually spending ad dollars on audience members who are not actually the educators that you guys are after. So it's a really important opportunity. It's a great way to start some of that targeting rather than serving ads to anyone and everyone. However, there are limitations based off of what the platforms themselves can infer from what we present ourselves as digitally. So there is a different approach that you can take for audience building and targeting your audiences. And that's really where Agile's advantage comes in. While yes, native targeting is great for that first step, with custom audiences like Agile uses to create and facilitate our clients' campaigns, there is an added layer of confirmation that you're reaching the individuals that you're after. So Agile's approach and how we work with our clients is actually to leverage our educator database, 7 million plus contacts from our education database. And that could be up from pre-K to 12 into higher ed. We also have public library information. So there are pretty much every different way that you could identify an educator or be interested in from our database to then be leveraged into audience building. For the example we use with native targeting, you're looking for classroom teachers in state of Indiana within a certain age range. We actually work with our account management team to build specific titles and audience lists from what you guys are after. So for this scenario, we have individuals in this particular state within certain age ranges, but then the granularity comes in with those titles. So do you want all teachers? Do you want just K through 5 teachers? Do you want high school science, chemistry, biology? Do you want math? Do you want certain educators or teachers that only teach at schools with different or set enrollment capacities or numbers? So there's really a granularity that comes from leveraging our database and building these audiences. First step is building the audiences to that granularity that you're after. So in this case, there's not the one size fits all with a teacher audience. It is, these are the specific types of teachers, or these are the specific types of principals, or CIOs, or superintendents that we are after. These are the Title I districts we're after. These are the Midwest school states that we're after. These are the types of funding that these types of schools are getting. We use all of that to build audiences for you. We pull that information from our database and build custom audiences for each of our platforms. So then we take that data and leverage it into building custom match audiences on the platform. That process is taking those lists, importing it into the platform, matching set fields, and then using that to then serve ads to only that specific audience. So there's no question of, okay, we're serving to all teachers. I'm no longer going to get served your ad, even though I look like a teacher, never taught a day in the classroom. You're specifically reaching educators that are active and current in the positions with the demographics that you're after. And I keep saying teachers, this could be anyone in our database, but for this example, we're just utilizing teachers as the example. So from there, we are very intentional in looking at where we place these audiences. So working with our clients, we identify which platforms are most viable. So they could have a campaign that we're looking at teachers on one platform, so teachers as influencers on Meta. We're looking at administration, whether that's principal, superintendent, certain officer level positions on LinkedIn, and then looking at Google ads, are we serving to everyone? And leveraging those match rates and consistency across those platforms. So there's a cohesion that comes from it. We're not serving necessarily the same audience on all channels. We're intentional as these individuals are most active on this channel, these individuals are most active on another, and then all of them may be active on another. By being intentional on the placement of those platforms and who we're serving your ads to, your ad dollars aren't being served or spent on individuals that you're not trying to actually reach. There's a cohesion that comes from being intentional in the outreach targeted to certain titles versus others in the messaging. While yes, we're promoting an overall message, the type of content or approach that is taken with a classroom educator versus addressing the issue from an administrative standpoint is two very different types of messaging. And that way, using these custom audiences, we can be specific in addressing each educator's problem and the solution that you guys have to address that. The difference between using the native targeting that's available in the platforms versus utilizing our approach with these custom audiences and the more tailored targeting leads to much higher engagement. It typically, on average, year over year, we see 2 to 3 times higher engagement, whether that's click-through rates, link clicks, form fills, anything like that for our clients. Each campaign has a different goal, so there is broad strokes. However, we also see more qualified leads. And the biggest thing overall is there is not a waste in your ad spend. So yes, there is an intentional targeting. You may be reaching less individuals. However, the individuals you're reaching are actually the ones you want to. So lower quantity of reach potentially, but higher quality of engagement and leads that come from that. And ultimately, you end up saving yourself ad spend dollars. So in addition to the benefit of leveraging Agile's database and our data for these custom match audiences, there's an added benefit of partnering with Agile when it comes to your campaign implementation and optimization. There's a strategic partnership that we implement with all of our clients, and that comes from our account management team as well as our data compilation team in partnership with your digital team members. And when we talk about how all of that integrates together, it really comes down to understanding the education market. We work cross-functionally with different teams in our organization. And what comes from that is we have an in-depth understanding of the education market. There are different times of year that are best for reaching educators at different parts of that cycle and at different levels of education, meaning pre-K to 12 or K to 12 markets is different than a higher education or even a public library market. And our data compilation team is really great at compiling all of the information on the trends that we're seeing in data flow. And from that, we're able to use that information to inform strategy for digital campaigns. So when we look at when schools go back in the fall, not every school starts in September. Not every district starts in August. Some schools go year round. So if we're talking with our clients about doing a back to school campaign, yes, we're going to build the audiences like we've talked about. We're going to look at which schools that we want to reach. But then there's an added layer that comes from that of once we have this overarching list, we're going to look at which schools start in August, which schools start in September. We will start campaigns with schools starting back in August before we would start the campaigns focusing on educators whose schools start back in September. So there's a very intentional strategic partnership that we go through with our clients. When we talk about budget season and when schools are planning for budgets and then when they're actually buying, we look at that January to March period for consideration. And then we look at April through May for actual purchasing, also a bit in the fall. So it really depends on what your product is, the intention behind it. We also have the same thing with professional development windows. So if we talk about professional development, oftentimes there's a spike in professional development actually occurring in late summer because educators are starting to go back for the year. So thinking about when are they actually planning these professional development opportunities for July? Okay, so if that's part of their budgeting planning, we need to think about spring for the year, that school year that's going to start in the fall. When we talk about budget season, are we just trying to reach decision makers? Oftentimes when we talk about budgeting with our clients, yes, the higher level positions in administration are the ones who ultimately sign off on purchasing decisions. However, there's real validity in trying to reach classroom level educators, department heads, even principals or assistant principals, in being those grassroots influencers. So when we think about that, what we actually see from our campaigns and from working with our clients is administrators are great to try to start reaching by email or professional digital platforms or search campaigns. in January once they're back in the classroom. However, we see a large spike of lower titles, meaning classroom or building titles, being most active on digital platforms in the break of December when everyone's out for the holidays. So oftentimes we'll work with clients and identify their audiences, whether it's building level positions or more district level positions, and isolating those audiences and then developing campaigns around that. So we may start a brand awareness campaign in December, those first or those last 2 weeks when they're out for the holidays, and then really do a bigger push into January. But that way you're starting to have 2 or 3 weeks of brand awareness campaigns before you do a bigger push into the buying cycle with more administrative titles being added in. So there's an intention that comes with all of our client campaigns, and it's really dependent on the client. It's really dependent on the time of the year and ultimately the client's goal. So there is not a one size fits all approach for any of our clients. We're just very intentional in looking at your initiatives, your goals, and ultimately the adoption of whatever your product or service is for schools or libraries. When we talk about the importance of privacy and compliance and the future of platform data going forward, meaning cookies or any tracking, pixels, things like that, there are real challenges that come from the digital landscape, but also challenges that come about in an omni-channel approach. And when we say omni-channel, we reference digital social platforms, but also that encompasses email. So as email providers or providers in general are taking more steps to ensure privacy of their users, you can see an influx of engagement on email campaigns with really high open rates, extremely high click rates. But when you actually look at the engagement statistics, all of those clicks or all of those opens occurred at the same time on the same date. So there's questions of validity that come into that. And that truly comes out of that privacy regulation those providers are creating for their users. Ultimately, yes, it could be that someone did click on your advertisement or click on your email and opened it and went to your landing page. That's ultimately what we hope for. But regardless of who's doing your email deployments, if you're taking that in-house and you see extremely high engagement rates, we're talking 60+% clicks from your email deployments into your landing page, it should give you pause of, is this actually what is happening? Are we actually seeing this high of engagement rate? Or when you dig into the analytics, we see all of these clicks occurred on the same day at 11:47 a.m. And that should give question of, yes, this email could be performing very well. However, the likelihood of 60% clicking on your advertisement at the same time, clicking on your email at the same time should give pause. And that's kind of where the importance of an omni-channel approach comes in, because yes, you are sending emails. Yes, you want engagement via email. However, everyone today feels like or appears to be attached to their mobile devices, to a technology in some standpoint. And so with digital, you're adding on that multi-touch approach. So yes, you're sending emails, whether or not they're actually being engaged with can be a question. However, if we're also sending ad placements and impressions being served on multiple channels digitally, whether it's Meta, so Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, LinkedIn, Reddit, and then we also look at your traditional digital channels of like Microsoft and Google, you're hitting multiple touch points. So even if some of that data privacy influences the engagement on one of those platforms, you're being intentional in the touch points across multiple channels, which is most likely to increase your engagement and overall your conversion of the audience that you're trying to reach. So there are real basic comparisons between native targeting and Agile's approach of custom audiences leveraging our database of educators. Native targeting, just as a reminder, really comes from utilizing what is available in the platforms. You go in, you go to your audience section, and you're selecting certain ages, certain geographies that they engage with this type of content, or their employment job industry is education, or they have a certain particular title. That approach while very helpful, can also lead to capturing individuals in your audience that you're not likely to want to reach, which can often cause an increased ad spend at a rate that you don't necessarily need to be spending at. With a leveraged custom audience built from a specific educator list from our database, you're specifically targeting potentially narrow audiences based off of what your organization's goals are. So if you see adoption in particular types of schools, at particular enrollment levels, particular geographies, different titles, there's a granularity that comes with that. Like I mentioned earlier, that can lead to a decrease in reach compared to a native targeting audience. However, the reach is more intentional and the ad spend is better utilized. When we talk about the timing that comes with an Agile partnership, I mentioned we're very aware of and intentional in monitoring budget cycles and seasonality of schools, shifts in different positions. If we see certain titles coming on with changes in education and other titles falling back, there's a fluidity that comes with our partnership. We aren't keeping our audiences set in stone. We are constantly having conversations with our clients as their organizational initiatives change and grow and they see different trends. We are constantly having that refresh of audiences, what we're seeing, we're not seeing, being intentional in how we work with our clients. Whereas with native targeting, you rather build an audience and there is some fluidity as people come into that audience or leave that audience. But there's a real intention that comes from utilizing the availability of our educator database and the expertise of our account management and digital teams to really ensure that your audience is actually who you're trying to reach. So if you have interest in learning more on how Agile works with our clients to create these custom tailored campaigns, how our custom audiences could be beneficial in improving your digital presence, as well as how we can just help your overall strategy when it comes to digital advertising and marketing. We really encourage you to reach out. We are here to partner with you and want to create strategies that are intentional to your organization and who you are trying to reach. And that's the pure benefit of working with Agile, because we are Agile and we enjoy working with our clients to be Agile partners.
Thank you for joining Agile's 2025 webinar, Beyond Native Ads, How Agile Data Redefines Precision Marketing for Educators. We hope today's session with Kassidy Kinner offered valuable insights into how first-party verified data is reshaping educator outreach in a privacy-first world. For more resources and to learn how Agile helps education organizations achieve precision, compliance, and measurable impact, explore the downloadable materials provided with this session. Thank you for watching.